You know, life has this funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Like that one quiet Tuesday afternoon. I had no idea how much it would change things. I was just cleaning the living room, humming to an old Bonnie Raitt tune, when a knock at the door pulled me out of my daydream. I opened it, and there stood my neighbor with a look in his eyes I hadn't seen before. What started as small talk turned into something that caught me completely off guard. And no, it's not what you're thinking. It was deeper, more meaningful, something I didn't even know I needed. Before I dive into the whole story, tell me, where are you watching this from? I love knowing which cities or towns you all are tuning in from. It's like sharing this little moment with friends across the country. And hey, if you enjoy these kinds of heartfelt stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap that like button. It really helps me bring you more of these real emotional journeys. Now, let me take you back to that afternoon. The sun filtered softly through the sheer curtains as I moved the coffee table aside, giving the rug one last vacuum before I'd call it done for the day. My back was already starting to protest a little, reminding me I wasn't 30 anymore. But there was something peaceful about it, the rhythm of cleaning, the fresh scent of lemon polish on the wooden shelves, the light hum of the neighborhood outside. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac in Portland. Most of the neighbors keep to themselves, but over the years, a few have become familiar faces. One of them is Thomas, the single man who lives 2 houses down. Around my age, maybe a year or 2 younger, graying at the temples but still walking like he had fire in his bones. We'd exchanged waves, polite smiles, once or twice some conversation while pulling trash cans to the curb. Nothing deep, just neighborly. That day, I was halfway through dusting the mantel when I heard the knock. Not loud, just a couple of light taps. I figured it might be a package or maybe Carla from next door needing help with her groceries again. When I opened the door and saw Thomas standing there, I blinked. "Hi, sorry to bother you," he said, shifting his weight. "I saw your front gate open and thought I'd check in. Everything all right?" It took me a second to respond. "Oh, yes. I was airing the house out a bit while cleaning. You know, spring dust." He smiled, eyes flicking behind me like he was about to say more, but then he hesitated. "I don't mean to intrude, but would it be too strange if I asked for a glass of water? I was out walking and didn't realize how warm it got." I stepped aside, surprised by my own quickness to invite him in. "Of course not. Come in." Thomas had never been inside my home. He paused at the entryway, almost like he was unsure if it was okay to step across. I guided him toward the kitchen, motioning for him to sit at the small breakfast table near the window. "You're braver than me," I said as I filled a glass at the sink. "I can't bring myself to walk in this weather unless it's absolutely necessary." He chuckled, a low, easy sound. "It clears my head. Been a rough couple of weeks at work, and walking's the only thing that helps lately." I turned, glass in hand, and noticed for the first time how tired he looked. Not in a worn-out way, but in the way people look when they've been carrying something for too long. He took the glass, fingers brushing mine briefly. "Thanks. This place smells good, like lemons and books." I laughed. That's probably accurate. I've had the same polish for 10 years, and I'm a hopeless reader. He sipped, then looked at me. "Can I ask you something weird?" My heart skipped slightly. I nodded, unsure what he meant. "Do you ever feel, I don't know, like you're in a chapter of life no one prepared you for?" His words caught me off guard, not because they were intrusive, but because they mirrored a thought I'd been carrying quietly for years. I sat across from him, hands folded. "All the time," I admitted. "It's like I did all the things I was supposed to, married young, raised kids, worked, paid off the house. And now it's like, what now?" He nodded slowly, looking into the glass. "Yeah, that's exactly it." There was a stillness between us after that, not awkward, but thoughtful. I noticed the way the sunlight highlighted the silver in his hair and the faint lines near his eyes. There was a softness in him I hadn't expected, a vulnerability that wasn't there during those short driveway chats. "You know," I said, "I don't think many people talk about this stage. We're expected to just settle, be content. But sometimes I feel like I'm still waiting for something." His gaze met mine again. Me too. I don't know what shifted in that moment, but it felt like the space between us got smaller. Not physically. He was still on the other side of the table, but emotionally. Like we'd pulled back curtains that neither of us realized were hanging between us. He glanced toward the living room. "Looks nice in there. You've got a real warmth to your home." "Thanks," I said, standing. "Want the rest of the tour?" He smiled and followed me as I led him into the freshly cleaned space. The scent of lemon still lingered. I watched him take it in, hands in his pockets, his steps unhurried. "This is my favorite part," I said, pointing to the small book nook I'd created by the window. A cushioned bench, a few old novels, and a lamp with a cracked but beloved shade. It's where I go when the world gets too loud. He walked over and sat down, gently tracing a finger along the spine of a tattered paperback. I'd give anything for a place like this. My house is still a bachelor cave, cold and mostly empty. I sat across from him again. "You could fix that, you know. It's never too late." He tilted his head. "Isn't it?" We were quiet again. And in that stillness, I felt a kind of unspoken understanding. Two people who'd spent decades being what they were supposed to be, only to realize they were still discovering who they actually were. He leaned forward slightly. "You ever think maybe we're not meant to do it all alone? Not at this age?" I met his eyes. "I think about that more than I admit." Something shifted again, slightly softly, like a door opening just a crack. Nothing dramatic. No confessions, no declarations. Just a shared moment of honesty, suspended in golden light and the faint scent of lemon polish. "I should probably head back," he said eventually, standing. I nodded, walking him to the door. "Thanks for stopping by." He paused, hand on the frame. "Would you mind if I stopped by again sometime?" I smiled. "I think I'd like that." And just like that, he left, the door clicking softly behind him. But something lingered in the air, something tender and new. And I knew deep down that the story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning, I found myself lingering by the window, a half-drunk cup of coffee cooling in my hands. It was a quiet day again, no wind, no rain, just the familiar hum of suburbia. But something felt different. It wasn't just the memory of Thomas's visit. It was the feeling that something inside me had quietly shifted. After all these years, I had grown used to the routine, the rituals of being alone, of keeping busy to fill space. But after yesterday, I realized how long it had been since someone really saw me. I didn't expect him to come back so soon. Honestly, I wasn't sure if he even would. People say things in the moment, especially when emotions bubble up, but often life pulls them away again. That's what I told myself anyway, as I wiped down the kitchen counters, checked the mail, rearranged the books on the shelf for no good reason. But at 4:13 p.m., yes, I glanced at the clock. There it was again. A soft knock, just like before. I opened the door, and there he was. Same calm face, but this time he was holding something. "Hi," he said. "I brought you this." He held out a small potted succulent, green and stubby, nestled in a little blue ceramic pot. I blinked. "What's this for?" "You mentioned your reading nook. Thought it might like some company." I laughed despite myself. "Well, that's really sweet. Come in." He stepped in and looked around like he hadn't seen it all just yesterday. "You know," he said, handing me the pot, I wasn't sure if it'd be weird to stop by again. "It's not," I said, placing the plant gently on the windowsill. "Honestly, I'm glad you did." We stood there, the air lightly scented with cinnamon. I had lit one of my favorite candles earlier, mostly for company. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full of questions neither of us were rushing to ask. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, motioning toward the kitchen. "Sure," he said, following me in. As the water boiled, he leaned on the counter, eyes scanning the magnets on my fridge, the travel souvenirs, the to-do list I never updated, a faded photo of me and my kids from 15 years ago. He nodded toward it. "Your mom." "Still am," I said with a smile, though they're both adults now. My daughter lives in Seattle. My son's in Denver. They visit when they can. He nodded slowly. I never had kids. Never really settled down. Came close once, years ago, but it didn't work out. I turned to him, surprised by the openness. "Was it hard?" "Still is sometimes," he said quietly. "I always figured there'd be more time. And then suddenly, there isn't." The kettle whistled, and I poured us each a cup, handing his over with both hands. He took it gently, fingers brushing mine again, this time lingering just a beat longer. We moved to the living room, settling into the couch like it was the most natural thing in the world. Outside, the sky had turned that soft amber gray, the kind that makes you want to curl up with a blanket and just listen to the rain that isn't fallen yet. "So what do you do all day?" he asked. "Besides clean and obsess over furniture placement?" I teased. "I read a lot. Take long baths. I bake sometimes. Nothing very exciting." "Sounds peaceful." "It is," I admitted, "but sometimes peaceful is just another word for lonely." He looked at me then, not with pity, but with something else. Recognition, maybe, or gratitude for hearing something he felt but never said out loud. "You know," he said, sipping his tea, "I've walked past your house 1,000 times, always wondered what it was like inside." "And?" I asked, smiling. "It's warmer than I imagined." We talked more. About music, childhood, the strange quiet that comes with aging. About our bodies changing, our memories softening, the joy of small things like a good cup of tea or a nap in the sunlight. I hadn't felt so connected in years. Eventually, the sky dimmed to a dusky purple, and he stood to leave. "Can I ask you something?" he said at the door. "Of course. Would you ever want to go for a walk together, just around the neighborhood?" I blinked, caught off guard by how much that small question stirred something in me. "I'd like that," I said. He smiled, a real one, eyes crinkling at the edges. "Tomorrow?" "Sure, just not at 4. That's my guilty pleasure TV hour." He laughed. "Noted. I'll come by at 6. And then he left, the door closing with that same soft click. I stood there for a moment, heart fluttering for reasons I wasn't ready to name. It wasn't love. Not yet, but it was something. Something real. Something new. And I couldn't help but smile. By the time the clock struck 6 the next evening, I had already changed my outfit 3 times. Ridiculous, right? I'm a grown woman, 50 years old, perfectly capable, independent, not the kind to flutter over a simple walk with a neighbor. And yet there I was, staring at myself in the mirror, debating whether the soft blue cardigan made me look calm and friendly or just old. I settled on something simple, jeans, a white blouse, and the cardigan anyway, because let's be honest, the spring air still carried a chill, and my shoulders weren't what they used to be. I told myself it wasn't a date. We were just 2 adults walking around the neighborhood. Casual. Comfortable. And yet, when I opened the door and saw Thomas standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, that familiar smile on his face, I felt something tighten in my chest. a quiet thrill, like the flutter of wind before rain. "You look nice," he said. "So do you," I replied, a little too quickly. "Ready?" He nodded, and we stepped out together into the amber light of early evening. The neighborhood was quiet, the sidewalks mostly empty except for a few dog walkers and a couple of teenagers skateboarding at the far end of the cul-de-sac. We fell into step naturally, our strides sensing without effort. For the first few blocks, we talked about ordinary things: the weather, the maple tree that had finally bloomed after a stubborn winter, the pothole near the corner that the city still hadn't fixed. But beneath the surface of our easy conversation was something else, a current, slow and steady, pulling us closer. We reached the small park tucked between the houses, where a paved trail circled a narrow pond. Ducks floated lazily on the water, their reflections rippling as the wind skimmed the surface. We paused at a bench beneath an old oak tree. Without speaking, we sat. For a few minutes, we just watched the ducks. It was peaceful, gentle, the kind of silence you only share with someone who makes you feel safe in it. Then he turned to me. "Can I ask you something kind of personal?" I glanced over, curious. "Sure." He hesitated, then asked, "Were you happy? In your marriage?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was invasive, but because it had been so long since anyone had cared enough to ask. I looked out over the pond, watching one of the ducks bob under the water and disappear. "I thought I was," I said, "for a long time. We had good years, raised 2 amazing kids, built a life together. But somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other. We just coexisted." "And now?" he asked softly. "Now I think I'm still figuring out who I am without all the roles. Wife, mom, hostess at holidays. Now it's just me. And that's both freeing and terrifying." He nodded, as if he understood more than he let on. "I've been alone a long time," he said. "Sometimes by choice, sometimes not. I'd always told myself I was better off that way. No one to disappoint, no one to lose. But lately, I've been wondering if I've just been protecting myself from something I actually need." That admission sat between us like a shared secret. He looked down at his hands. "Yesterday, after I left your house, I walked past my living room window and caught my own reflection. I looked lighter, and it scared me a little, because I don't want to be someone who only feels good when someone else is around. But at the same time, I've missed this: company, conversation, a voice that isn't just the TV." I felt tears prick the edges of my eyes, not out of sadness, but out of recognition. "I know exactly what you mean," I said. "It's not about needing someone to complete you. It's about wanting someone to see you, to choose you, even after all the layers." He smiled at that. "Exactly." We sat a while longer, letting the words settle. The wind picked up slightly, and I instinctively pulled my cardigan closer. Thomas noticed. "Here," he said, standing and slipping off his jacket. "Take this." "I'm fine," I protested. He held it out anyway. "Please." I gave in, letting him drape it over my shoulders. It was warm, and it smelled faintly of cedar and laundry soap. Comforting. He sat back down, closer this time. Our arms brushed. "I hope this doesn't sound too forward," he said after a pause, "but I like being around you. It's easy, like we skipped all the awkward getting-to-know-you parts." I smiled, heart thudding a little faster. "I feel the same way." And then, without asking, without rushing, he reached out and gently took my hand. Just held it. No pressure, no expectations. Just warmth. We sat there like that as the sky turned to a soft lavender, the ducks settling in for the night, the last of the kids leaving the park. Eventually, we stood and walked back toward our street, still hand in hand. When we reached my door, he let go. "Thank you," he said, "for tonight." "Thank you," I replied. He hesitated. "Would you maybe want to do this again? Maybe dinner next time?" I smiled. "I'd like that." And then he did something that sent a flutter right through me. He leaned in and kissed my cheek. Just the lightest brush, like a whisper. "Good night, Claire," he said. "Good night, Thomas." He turned and walked away, his silhouette slowly fading into the glow of the street lamp. I stood there for a long while, jacket still around my shoulders, heart fuller than it had been in years. Maybe life wasn't finished surprising me after all. The next few days felt like a quiet bloom in early spring, gentle, unexpected, full of promise. It wasn't just about Thomas. It was the way I suddenly noticed the soft rustling of the leaves again, the scent of morning coffee, the little thrill of anticipation when I heard a knock on the door. I hadn't felt this alive in a long time. Thomas kept his word. He called the next evening. Yes, called, and asked if I'd like to come over for dinner. His voice was calm, but carried that familiar, endearing nervousness, like he wasn't used to asking, and I wasn't used to being asked. "Nothing fancy," he said. "Just pasta, salad, and I may have picked up a bottle of wine that claims to pair well with both." I laughed. "As long as there's dessert." "There's chocolate cake," he added quickly, like he'd rehearsed it. "I'm in." When I arrived at his house, it was like stepping into a different version of him. The bachelor cave he joked about was still there in parts. Minimalist furniture, shelves of books stacked haphazardly, but he'd lit candles in the dining nook, and there was music playing softly in the background. Jazz. Ella Fitzgerald, I think. "Welcome," he said, a little sheepishly. "It smells amazing." He led me to the kitchen, where he'd laid everything out neatly. Steaming pasta, fresh arugula salad with lemon vinaigrette, a small decanter of red wine. 2 plates, 2 glasses, and folded cloth napkins that didn't match, but in the most charming way. As we ate, we talked more openly than we ever had before. He told me about his youth, how he'd almost moved to New York to pursue writing, but stayed to care for his aging parents instead. About the woman he loved in his 30s, who left him because she wanted children and he wasn't ready. About the silence that crept into his life afterward, so slowly he didn't realize how loud it had become until it was all he could hear. I told him about my marriage, how it felt like a slow unraveling, not with anger or drama, but indifference. How I spent years giving pieces of myself away until I realized I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. About the fear of starting over at 50, when most people think the story is already written. He listened, really listened. His eyes never drifted, his posture never shifted impatiently. And I did the same for him. There was something beautiful about it. 2 people not trying to impress each other, not performing, just being. After dinner, we moved to his small den. He handed me a mug of tea, and we sat on the couch, closer this time, our legs touching lightly. The candlelight flickered between us. "I don't know where this is going," he said after a long silence, his voice almost a whisper. "And I'm not in a rush to define it, but I know this, being with you feels good, easy, like I've known you longer than I have." I looked at him, my heart both racing and steady. "It feels the same for me?" He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered at the side of my face, fingers warm against my skin. And then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was soft and sure and patient, like a question asked without words. And the answer was yes. When we pulled apart, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Later, as he walked me home under the night sky, our hands intertwined, I realized how rare this was. This quiet beginning. This kind of connection that isn't built on passion alone, but on understanding, on being seen and accepted not for who we used to be or who we pretended to be, but for who we actually are. At my doorstep, he paused. "Claire," he said, "I know we've only just started something here, but I want you to know I'm not going anywhere." I touched his arm, eyes meeting his. "And I'm not asking you to rush anything. Let's just walk this together. See where it goes." He nodded, smiling. "Slow and steady?" "Exactly." He kissed me again, another soft, lingering kiss, and then he walked away, turning once to wave before disappearing down the path. I stepped inside and leaned against the closed door, smiling like a teenager. But this was different. This was earned, grown, deep. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it. Hope. Not the kind that wishes on stars, but the kind that knows it's never too late. That even at 50, life can surprise you with something tender, real, and new. That love, real, rounded, and mutual, can find you, even after all the years you thought you'd missed your chance. And this time, I was ready to receive it.